Okay, when it comes to real beams and then trying to make predictions of their behavior, we've got to somehow make the bridge between reality and then what ends up being in our mathematical models. And you've seen this drawing before when we were talking about the basic definition of our beam connection and support models from a theoretical standpoint. But now we're going to look at the very same page. It's page 3 of this whole module from a more practical standpoint and look at it slightly differently. And the keys that we're actually going to look for are going to be: is the web connected? And are the flanges connected? Whether it's a steel beam or not doesn't matter. The web is this middle portion of the beam, and the flanges are the outer portions, whether it's just a rectangular cross-section or whether it's the little middle part, right? So there's your web, and there's your flange. Now, in this particular one, we've got a beam framing into a column, and we have an end plate, and that end plate is fully welded up here, fully welded down below, and it's fully connected along the web itself. All of them are connected. Right? This is going to be an example of a fixed connection. Right? And so that means that when we look at, here's the column, here's the beam framing in, we sometimes put little brackets in there to indicate that this beam, if I take the free body diagram of it, right, we're just cutting it off the middle part, is going to transfer fully into the column all three internal beam unknowns, and that is a shear, an axial force, and a bending moment. Right? All three. That makes it a fixed connection: shear, axial force, and bending moment. As opposed to if we are connecting, right? Let me write that again too. Connecting both flanges and web, or the outer part and the middle portion. Right? Whereas when you look down below, we've got a beam framing into another beam, a beam framing into the middle of the column, and another beam framing into the outer part of the column. And there is a gap at the flange. And particularly here, there's a huge, that's called a cope. That's another gap. That cope or cut is created so that this fits underneath the flange of the supporting beam, and these two flanges will be at then the same elevation. Don't need to make the cope down here because this beam is not as deep as the one that is supporting itself. See the little holes for the bolts, and so these flanges don't line up anyways, and so there's going to be a gap down there too. This is going to be a web only connection. And that means that we have in effect then a hinge connection, or a pin if you prefer it that way, but hinge or pin, where the only thing we're going to transfer from the beam into the supporting column are going to be the shear and any axial force that's present in the beam, which oftentimes there isn't. So sometimes we even think about that as effectively like a roller, but it could transfer an axial force into the column. Notice how I turned all these around. Those are just the internal forces there, right? So a web-only connection is really a hinge or a pin, whereas when we connect up both the flanges and the web, we get a fixed connection, or a rigid connection is also what this is sometimes referred to. Right? Two basic models for beam to column type connections. We'll explore more of this kind of thing in other scenarios.